Okay, number 4, there definitely are realities to which we do not have access as experimentalists, as scientists, as human beings. Wave functions exist, we think, right? But we'll never see one. According to quantum mechanics, there is a sort of barrier between the ultimate reality here and everything we can observe. And actually, there's a whole field called quantum cryptography that is predicated upon the fact that we cannot access the wave function directly. This is not just like a conjecture. There are people pouring millions of dollars into quantum cryptography because they believe we cannot access this fundamental element of reality called the wave function. And finally, I think the biggest takeaway from this whole talk, and from quantum mechanics in general, is that we think that reality is like this. Tables, apples, grapes, a door, to the outside world, not to the matrix, presumably. But yeah, but we find that it's like this. It's really bizarre. And I think this is the fundamental takeaway. I think Feynman was a famous physicist at Caltech. He said of quantum mechanics, do not keep saying to yourself, if you can possibly avoid it, but how can it possibly be like that? Nobody knows how it can be like that, but his point was, it is like that. So the takeaway is, you don't get to tell reality how reality works. Reality tells you how it works, and you have to keep an open mind and let the way that reality reveals itself. There's a really funny story. So we talked about Copenhagen and how it's inherently probabilistic in nature, and Einstein hated that. And this is the origin of Einstein's famous quote that God does not play dice with the universe. And now it's reported that as a rejoinder, Niels Bohr said to him in response, Albert, stop telling God what to do with his dice. And that's probably apocryphal. But the bottom line, that's what I'm saying here, is that we have to, as scientists, as people, as human beings, we need to retain an attitude of an open-minded skepticism. Open-minded to new ideas and skeptical of old ones. We can't just cling, with white knuckles to our old ideas about the way nature works, or reality works, for that matter, more broadly speaking. Because often, if quantum mechanics shows us anything, it's that reality does not conform to our whims. Okay, in conclusion, so what does quantum mechanics say about these fundamental presuppositions of the scientific endeavor? And I would say that it really makes things complicated, right? Is the universe rational? Well, you tell me. You just heard this talk. Is it comprehensible to human understanding? Well, after 10 years, I think I can get a little bit of a handle on quantum mechanics, but again, you're kind of reaching the point where you're like, this is so unintuitive, so bizarre, that I wonder if the universe is even comprehensible in the end to human beings. Things like causality, Occam's razor, an infinite number of parallel undetectable universes. Talk about a multiplication of entities. That's one if I ever heard of one. So again, all of these basic assumptions with which we operate when we do science are called into question by quantum mechanics. But secondly, what about these sort of naive assumptions that I think are pretty common in the world, certainly among people who hold to naturalism? Again, the idea that there's no supernatural realm beyond or outside of nature. So again, these are ideas like, well, the laws of physics state that miracles are possible. If God exists, he couldn't intervene in the world, blah, 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 blah. Again, what does quantum mechanics say about these? Well, it challenges these assumptions. Number one, we said that nothing is impossible. It's just very, very, very unlikely. And God, if he wanted to do a miracle, wouldn't have to violate natural laws, because nothing is a violation of natural laws. If you adopt Copenhagen, then consciousness is absolutely a fundamental property of a reality of the universe. Okay? Now, you don't have to adopt Copenhagen, you can adopt many worlds, but even then, there are problems with the idea that consciousness is somehow just totally physical. That even in many worlds, you have problems reconciling that. I won't go into that now. And finally, this idea that, well, the universe doesn't contain unknowable or non-measurable realities that are inaccessible to observation. False. That's just, again, the whole field of quantum cryptography is built on the falsity of this premise. Okay, in conclusion, as I've said, I don't know that any physicist denies the reality of the truth of quantum mechanics. It is the most successful physical theory in the history of physics. And yet, Einstein, even Schrödinger, they found these ideas not just unintuitive, but almost disgusting. does challenge you in a lot of ways. So thanks again. Thanks to my wife, Christina, my advisors, past and present, and thank you all for listening. One quick thing to mention, I will stick around after the talk for as long as people want after the meeting, and answer whatever questions you might have. We'll try to answer them. And second, next week I'll be returning to give a talk about the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And this actually ties very nicely into this talk, because obviously the resurrection is a miracle. And in fact, it's a central miracle of Christianity. I think too often people hear miracles and they say, no, those are impossible. Those can't happen. And I would say, first of all, if you think miracles violate the laws of nature, I would say, no, not anymore. You're working from a classical understanding of the way nature works. And of course, there are other philosophical reasons we'll get into next week. But the bottom line is, I want to encourage people to keep an open-minded attitude that fits to reality, essentially, and to things like the resurrection. We can't simply dismiss them a priori as violations of nature. We at least have to give them a hearing and think about the evidence itself. Okay, so I'll see you guys next week, and thank you again for listening.